Please, can you mute yourself, please? Hello, please, can you mute yourself? Mr. Raf, are you there? Mr. KAYODE-ADEJI, are you there? So we're still expecting Mr. Raf and Mr. KAYODE-ADEJI. When they join us, I would introduce them. So please, let's just take note that this particular colloquium is in two parts. The first part is the moderator will ask questions to the panelists, the members of panel, and they will answer those questions. Then the second part of this colloquium is the audience will ask questions. So I'm going to give the opportunity for the audience to ask questions, and it's going to be you have a lot of time for you to do that. You can ask as many questions as possible because this is a colloquium. We need to talk about this particular issue on online spaces for the access of information in Nigeria. So I would like to begin. Dr. Frederick Mordi, are you here, please? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Dr. Okori.
Yes. So I would like to start with you. I hope you don't mind.
Please go ahead.
Okay, let's. Thank you very much.
It is usually ladies first, but in this case, women.
Okay. The ladies have their turn. All right. So, okay. So, Dr. Mordi, you know, when we talk about corporate communication, we talk about corporate communication, we say that corporate communication is the use of communication by organizations to establish relationship with their internal and external stakeholders. Now, the question is there a link between the universal access to information and corporate communication? Please enlighten us.
Definitely. Just to let you know, I'm still not video enabled, so I'll be talking without my camera. Maybe when they pull me back in, then you see my face.
Okay.
So good morning once again, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Corey, for this question. I mean, it's a very interesting question. I operate in the corporate communication space, and then I have a background in media studies. So I used to be a journalist, so I then understand the process of communication end to end. So when you say, is there a link between universal access to information and corporate communication? My answer is a definite yes. If you see the trend, communication has evolved over the years. The way we manage and receive information. In the past, we started with orality. I'm going way back into time. We started with orality, oral tradition. Then we didn't have means of writing. But with the invention of the alphabets, we moved from orality to literacy. Those who can read and write, were the champions in the literary world, in the literacy world. But currently, what we have is another era. The third era is the electracy era. This is the era where we do digital communications. So from oral to literate and now to digital. Now, digital communication has thrown up a whole lot of opportunities and challenges as well for us in corporate communications industry. Let me give you an instance. It took radio 38 years to reach 50 million listeners when the radio was invented. It took television 13 years to reach 50 million viewers. In just 9 months, Facebook added over 100 million users to the platform. So you can see the phenomenal rate of adoption of users in the digital era. So what does this all mean for corporate communication practitioners like us? It means we have to be constantly on top of our game. We do not have to be complacent. As technology changes, we also learn and adopt the new technology, and we adapt as well. So yeah, a resounding yes for me. There's definitely a link between universal access to information and then corporate communication. Now, we live in the internet era, Internet is now referred to as the fifth estate. Everybody is now a reporter. You generate news, you send messages to people, and then the rate of response is faster than what it used to be, what we used to know in terms of virality of information flow. So you have one-to-one communication, one-to-many, and then this concept of convergence, where a mobile device, for instance, can perform a whole lot of functions. My mobile phone, for instance, I can say it. With my mobile phone, I can watch television, read my news instead of going to newsstands to buy newspapers. I can share information with my contacts. I can go to LinkedIn. So many things I can do with this. So it then means for us in this era, there's far more access to information now than ever before. So for the private sector like us, I'm going to be stressing the word private sector because that's where I operate in. For me, we have our internal and external audiences. Yes, you started off by defining what corporate communication is, which is very good. It's an umbrella term that covers all forms of communication carried out by an organization. Corporate communication is not only done by us in private sector. In public sector, they also do corporate communications, and they also manage their different publics, or what you call stakeholders. But for us, when you say universal access to information, I'm stressing that word is really very critical here. As a listed company, Cadbury Nigeria PLC is listed, so we are required by law to disclose our information to the investing public. So every quarter, we upload our results on NSE, Nigerian Stock Exchange, or Nigerian Exchange platform. We publish it in newspapers, we make it accessible to our investors, and then online too, we upload our information on our website. So everybody has access to this information. So in that case, our information flow in the private sector is practically fluid. But in the government sector, it is not always the case. There is this Official Secret Act of 1962 by the federal government of Nigeria that makes it an offense for an authorized person to divulge government information to the public. Even though we have what we call Freedom of Information Act of 2012, that fear still persists in the public sector for managers of corporate communication in the public sector. So you find that it almost seems as if they're walking on a tightrope when it comes to information dissemination. But happily, organizations like NIMSI, Nigerian Identity Management Commission or something, and then the NCC, Nigerian Communication Commission, I think they are forward-looking. They have social media platforms that they use in reaching out to their various publics. So this way, they then increase access to information. So in a nutshell, I would say yes, that in this era we live in, universal access to information has increased. And we also have to up our game, to use the various platforms that this has thrown up for us. Today we have about 122 million Nigerians, 122.5 million Nigerians who are connected to the internet. And our internet penetration rate is one of the highest in Africa, 55.4% as of January 2023. So yeah, in a nutshell, I said there's definitely a link between access to information and corporate communication. But we don't have to keep adapting as new technology comes up, so we're able to better manage our stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Moody. I like that insight. I like your perspective. But I want to take it a bit deeper, if you don't mind. And you mentioned the issue about with the public sectors, when they have issues, they are not to disclose some information because of an official secret act that they are not to disclose information. But I want to know your perspective, because I know that there's some corporate private sector companies whereby they have policies on non-disclosure of information. Do this contradict with the universal access to information? If yes, why? And what can be done? And if no, then please explain further.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Okuri. We have what is usually called non-disclosure agreement. This comes in when you're signing a contract with another party. The kind of information I talked about is the one that members of the public should have access to. I mean, what should be in public domain. When it comes to information management, really, there are people who are authorized in the private sector that are operating to speak to the public or to disclose information to the public. Not everyone in the organization can speak on behalf of the company. I'm the official spokesman of my organization. So when I manage those sort of information from maybe media, investors, government, all sort of stakeholders, um, when we have non-disclosure agreements, we are venturing into the realm of law, legal, because there are some agreements we sign with some parties that we are not to disclose the terms of the contract, but it's not the general information that the public should have access to. I don't know if I answer your question correctly.
Yes, you did. You did in a way. And what actually I want you to go, well, what I want you to touch more on is I know that some banking industry, for example, if you're working in the bank, that they say you should not disclose information. I know that yes, the PR and the corporate, the head of corporate communications are actually the face and the brain behind any form of communication. But when we talk about bits and pieces, informations, or let's say filling some document or even questionnaire, filling of questionnaires, you find out that some companies will say, look, we don't disclose any information even to filling of questionnaire. So that is what I'm trying to say in terms of that. Do this contradict with universal access to information? That is actually that's where I wanted you to go towards to, please.
Very good. I happily will answer your question. Let's look at it this way. I did my thesis using one of Nigerian banks as my case study. I know how difficult it is to get information from the banking sector because of their regulation and all of that. So what I did, I just went straight to the top. I started from top down. I went to the management. I discussed with the corporate communications people. I disclosed my mission, and I wrote a letter to them indicating what I wanted to do with the information, like just for research purposes only. And they happily obliged. So yeah, I got information from across all the 20 countries that they operate in because there was I made contact with the management at the top and I disclosed my intentions to them, which were genuine. If you're doing research, you should disclose your intentions for ethical reasons. So that they understood what I wanted, that was for research purposes. Yes, your question is quite correct. Even my organization, we receive requests from schools or people doing their research for us to fill questionnaires. It depends on the kind of information they want. We can fill it too. Once I see it and it's something that will not really be of conflict of interest to us, we go ahead and fill it. Some of this information they request for already there in public domain, just essentially harmless. But it is where there is no buy-in, where there is no prior communication, where there is communication gap that seems to create that lacuna, where there seems to be lack of cooperation in accessing information.
I thank you very much for your perspective. I would like to bring the other panelists into this conversation. I've been informed that you can actually switch on your videos now. Sorry for that particular technical hitch. So you can actually switch on your video now. It's enabled. Mrs. Temitope, are you there, please?
Yes, I am. Yes, I'm here. Dr. Corey, I don't know if you can hear me.
Mrs. Temitope, are you there, please?
Yes, I'm here. Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you very much. You can actually switch on your video if you want to.
My video is on.
Okay, that's good. Okay, to soon pop up. All right, Mr. Temitope, I believe you've listened to Dr. Mordi. What he has actually said, his perspectives regarding corporate communications and universal access to information. When we talk about broadcast journalism, we say broadcast journalism has to do with journalism that has to do with radio, television, and even the internet. Now, is there a link between the universal access to information and broadcast journalism? If yes, please enlighten us.
Well, definitely, Dr. Okori, there's a link, between the universal access to information and what we do as broadcast journalists. I mean, information is the tool of our trade. Without information, there's really nothing, that we are selling, so to speak. So now, let me just quickly explain what universal access to information means. I know everybody already knows that, but just for the sake of this discussion, I'd like to re-emphasize it. Universal access to information means that everyone has the right to seek, receive, and impact information. It's an integral aspect of the freedom of expression. And of course, freedom of expression also encompasses the freedom of the press or freedom of the media, which is a fundamental principle that communication and expression through various media, it could be television, it could be radio, it could be, through YouTube channels online, like you've said, is a right, it should be considered a right that can be exercised freely. So for me, universal access to information is the lifeblood of my profession. The media, broadcast journalists play an essential role in informing the public about issues of interest. And it relies on the ability for us to seek and get information either through official, sometimes unofficial, but verified sources. So when we have universal access to information, then you can have, it serves as a pillar for a healthy, inclusive, informed, and democratic society. Now, universal access to information is particularly important to me and my colleagues, broadcast journalists, because it gives us that right to actually search for the information that we need. It gives us the idea, it gives us the right to express ourselves online, offline, to access information, get the opinions of others, the expressions of others. This could be political, it could be on religion, it could be, opinions of other thought leaders, that we need to get. And then sometimes it might not be offensive, sometimes it might be offensive, but it is our duty as broadcast journalists to air all these different opinions so that people can make informed decisions and informed choices when they need to. However, we are also aware of our limitations. Even though we have a right, to tell people what is happening, we have a right to share information. We must also ensure that we do not share messages that incite discrimination. We must not share messages that incite hatred or violence. I'm sure you know that's gatekeeping in the media. And of course, once in a while, when we step out of line, we have regulatory bodies like the NBC, waiting for us. So in a nutshell, for me, universal access to information means having a free and easy access to the tool of my trade, which is information, without fear of prosecution or persecution. Universal access to information also means that I'm protected by public institutions, by the government, in the course of doing my job. I should not be prosecuted. I should not be persecuted for doing my job so far as I do not incite hatred, I do not incite discrimination, and I do not incite violence.
Okay. Thank you for your perspective. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, thank you for your perspective. I like the aspect that you actually touched on press freedom. And when we talk about press freedom, we say press freedom is the ability for individuals to publish information or broadcast information without any form of interference. And from literature, we talk about press freedom warrior and press freedom warrior. And when you talk about a press freedom warrior, we talk about an individual that pays substantial sacrifice for truth seeking and truth telling. And when you talk about a press freedom warrior, it's someone that shows substantial concern about issues, but not ready to pay sacrifices. Now, can you link this with the use of online spaces?
Well, we know that a lot of journalistic activity, takes place on the internet. We know that reporting online can reach out to a faster and to a broader audience, than the traditional media can. And that's why I guess most radio stations and television stations right now, they have online presence, they have podcasts, they have YouTube channels, and so many avenues where news and opinion are being shared freely. Now for the warriors, those who get the news and sometimes sacrifice their lives. Most times this information are shared in real time, online. And I think there's an echo somewhere.
Please continue.
Okay. Now, for the okay, I was talking about the warriors. Yes, for those who sacrifice, some of those who die in the line of duty. If we do not have those information sometimes put online, for instance, like what's happening in Syria, majority of the journalists that are reporting about the war in Syria, very few of us are actually there. But majority of this information that we are reporting on, they are gotten online. From people that are actually there and have the opportunity to take videos, to get interviews, which are posted online. And through the use of the online media, we know that the world now is a global village. I can easily access what's happening in Syria. I can easily access what's happening in Yemen, in all the difficult and hard to reach areas. So which is why definitely there's a link, between press freedom and online access. Now, you also remember that during the COVID-19 pandemic, when the pandemic started in China, there was a lot of attempt by the government, to subdue that information, so to speak. But thanks to the people that were there, who were able to share their experiences, who were able to actually put information out online of what's happening in China, people became aware that there was an epidemic and there was a need, to rise up and actually do something about it. Now, press freedom and online access is very important, because in countries where you have them muzzling the internet, so to speak, or where they are restricting access to the internet, how do we expose corruption? How do we expose maladministration? How do we expose unethical behavior? How do we talk about serious human rights violation if we do not have access to the internet? So for the warriors, they have a free access, so to speak, for countries where internet is not being restricted, to post their work. And then for the for those also that are not actually on the front line but are actually working, gives us an avenue to have access to truthful, accurate, balanced information, especially when there's no hidden agenda on what we want to do with the information at our disposal. Dr. Okore.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you for your perspective. Thank you. So, okay. Dr. TOLULOPE, are you there, please? Dr. TOLULOPE, are you there, please? Okay, please unmute yourself.
Yes, that has been done.
Yes. Can you unmute yourself? Yes, thank you.
Yes,
so I want to bring you to this conversation. Now, I'm sure you're aware about the current CMCR.
Yes.
That they call curriculum metrics assessment standards. And
yes.
And there are a number of new courses for broadcast journalism. How can we incorporate the teaching of online spaces in this new curriculum?
Actually, I would first say it's a welcome development that I feel has been delayed for a very, very long time. And I think with the process ongoing now, I think that there are so many things that we have now incorporated into our curriculum, as it were. And I'm also excited that those in the academia are also involved in the process. So it's not just an NUC thing where they make a lot of suggestions as to the courses that should be included, because we are the ones here and we definitely know where the gaps exist. So it's a combined effort that I think is actually welcome. Now, to answer your question, I think I've answered a little bit of your question to say that all, in both the organizations and for us and NUC, they are all involved in this process. We have observed the gaps and we are trying to fill in those gaps. However, there's also something that I feel is still missing. And I think probably this is because there is a very wide gap between the universities and the establishments themselves. And I'm so glad that people from the media industry, they are here as well. Sometimes we believe that when we tell students to go for industrial training for 3 months, 2 months, we believe it's sufficient enough, and it's not, because the coming in of the online space, you can see it's changing so fast. So it is not, even sometimes when you're done with school and you go to the media industry to work, to be honest, the changes that go on there is so fast, faster than what we are providing in the universities. I know for us here in Covenant University, we are making so much effort, especially when it comes to the practicals. But I think we need to be intentional about the relationship that exists between those in the media industry and also those in the universities. For instance, I would have preferred, or we would have preferred, that you have a program in mass communication, or now what is going to be College of Communication or something, to have 3 years just for their courses and 1 year for industrial training, where they have to be attached or assigned to a particular media industry, and they spend 1 year. Because the reality of what exists in the industry is way different from some of the things they learn in most of our universities these days. And I think when you talk about the CC mass that is being worked on at the moment, I think that is not included. When you see a lot of ONDs, they're coming for IT, they're doing 2 months, 1 month. In fact, some universities now have started reducing it to 6 weeks. And that is, I don't think that is realistic enough, especially if we understand what media communication really entails. It's a whole lot of things. And the online space is even making it more complex. So there's that thing of retraining and trying to catch up with these drastic changes that are existing, because whether we like it or not, it is benefiting us as people in the media industry. Although I believe there are some check and balance that needs to still be implemented, although maybe exist on paper, but yet not implemented. So talking about the drastic changes going on, it is necessary for us to understand the nature of those changes and see how we can incorporate it into the CC mass curriculum. It's not just enough for us to change those courses. Yes, that is the decision that we ought to have made a long time ago, and I think that is working. And all the parties involved are really passionate about it and doing the best that they can. But I will still emphasize the need for including the industry, because what you see when you go there, it's a bit different. And because most of the media organizations, journalists, both print journalists and broadcast journalists, are quickly embracing and catching up with those changes, it is it's not at the same pace we can catch up as people in the academia. So there's need for that connection, for that very close relationship. There is a relationship now, but it's, in my own book, it's limited, because we just have instances where we probably invite a newscaster based on the course that we are teaching to come and maybe take a class, or have the town and gown we have in Covenant University every session for the students. to come around. And I think that's insufficient to really get the students to have this hands-on training. Some of the students, when they get there for their IT, because, you know, media people are very perfect. Let me say they are perfectionists. And you cannot just go on air and make a mistake. It's a very sensitive profession. So in most cases, for that period of 1 month, 2 months that they are there, they are practically not even allowed to do anything. So I don't see any form of quality when it comes to us saying that they should go for IT for 1 month, for 2 months, for 6 weeks. No, I think even 6 months, I think is still too small for them to actually learn. And sometimes some of the media practitioners, they want to have enough or sufficient trust in these young people. So why not make it 3 years program, and the last year, let them go for industrial attachment and have full training where they do a lot of projects, where they go out. They really experience the rudiment in this profession. I think that is when they will be able to practice very well. Yes, elementary knowledge is very good, because I think I am among those that went into the media industry. I experienced the OND and HND and also university. So I can compare it very well and kind of understand that these changes when it comes to online platform and other things that the online platform is really going to surprise us with. That's what I tell my students. Then it is important for our students to be in that environment, experience the environment, experience journalists that are practicing. That is also very important. They need that connection, both in the broadcast industry and also even in the film industry. And then you see them once they graduate, for them to be able to melt into the system becomes very, very easy. So I think they are doing a lot of good things now with the CCMAS. I'm excited about it. I think in most cases, when my HOD calls us for the meeting, we are all always excited and interested in contributing. But I think the gap that exists, that I think it should also be included, might be having a closer relationship with the industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. TOLULOPE, for those insights. I want you to help us to connect the dots among these concepts: narrowcasting, podcasting, and online spaces. Narrowcasting, podcasting, and online spaces.
Okay, there are lots of similarities, and I think that is also another confusion when it comes to the online space. And that is also the confusion we kind of encounter even when we are teaching. Because now when you look at the online space, somehow I agree with the fact that, or I believe that is a confusing space where we are finding it difficult, even for us as lecturers, to do a form of categorization, because new things begin to come up. So there are so many similarities in this concept that even when you are delivering knowledge to your students, you kind of find this form of limitation. And the categorization, sorry, can be done based on the features that some of these things have. So it is another problem that we have on the online space, that we will still have on the online space. I remember when the online space kind of came to life, a lot of people in computer science, they were like, oh, you guys claim you have new media. There's nothing like new media. Stop including it in your curriculum. It's all about computer science. It has nothing to do with mass communication. And you had that rivalry between mass communication students and computer science students, because now somehow we are claiming part of what belongs to them. Well, that's what they say. So it is really difficult, and that's another thing I feel the curriculum has to do. When you say we have print media, we have broadcast media, and then we have online media. Under print, under broadcast, you can specifically categorize when you're teaching your students. But when you get to the online space and knowing the changes that exist on that online space, then it becomes difficult for you, even as a lecturer, to be able to tell the students that, because it basically has no structure in terms of the features they perform and the what they do in terms of delivering information. It's like we're creating, or the online space has so many diverse platforms. It's unstructured. It's difficult for us to even structure it and say, okay, when you get to the online space, it's divided into these, and these categories, and this performs this, because there are so many similarities that exist. So that's another thing that the CC mass has to do, especially when it comes to the fact that we as communicators have now adopted the online space as one of our media categories. So, Dr. Nelson, I hope I've answered your question, but that is the confusion in terms of actually defining what each of these terms and what the differences are. And I think that is something that we as maybe computer science people have been able to do that successfully. And I think they've also agreed based on the fact that somehow we have an aspect of the online media space that belongs to mass communication. However, it's important for us, or for NUC, or for those in the media industry, to really have a structure and a particular, I think books should even be published in that area, so we have a clear understanding of what is on the online space and how are they different, and what are they used for, and how can they be used in the aspect or area of media.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for your perspective. I really like that. I like what you've at your submissions. Thank you so much. Many of our audience are already sending messages on the text, and I want to bring them into this conversation. But before I bring them into this particular conversation on this particular subject, I want to confirm if Mr. Adegoke is around and Mr. Raf AKPAN is around. Are they around, please? Mr. AKPAN? Mr. Adegoke?
Yes. Good morning, Dr. Korea. Raf AKPAN is on.
Okay, that's Mr. Raf AKPAN. Okay, thank you very much. I would ask you your questions, but please let's be patient because my audience also wants to ask questions to the panelists. So I want to bring them into this particular conversation. Mr. Tolu, please, you can proceed from here.
Yeah, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Yeah, so I think we have a question from Mr. Presley. So it directs his question to Mrs. Temitope. So for Temitope, I enjoyed your presentation and I really learned about the nuances of the warriors and warriors. Thank you. So my question is, how absolute or relative is the concept of freedom, especially within the digital space, digital access and digital restriction? And the second question I had, he said, do we see freedom only when there is corruption and human rights violations? So those are his two, there are the others.
Sorry, can you repeat the first question for me, please? I got the second one, but the first one.
So the first one is, how absolute or relative is the concept of freedom, especially within the digital space, digital access, and digital restriction?
Okay.
Then he also wants to know.
Yeah, you were
about
saying
the security issues. My question, yeah.
Okay, well, let me start with is freedom only something about is freedom only relevant when there's maladministration, corruption? Am I right? Did I get that correctly?
Yes, you're right.
Yes, you're right. Okay, okay. Now, definitely, I don't think it's only when we have. I don't think it's only when we have human rights violations. I don't think it's only when we have human rights violations, or when there are issues of corruption, maladministration. Like I said earlier, I think freedom of information is important at all times, because even when you have great inventions and scientific discoveries, you should be able to access it. You should be able to put it out there. Journalism is not only about bad news, even though we know that bad news sells faster, but it's also about, great inventions, things that are not everyday ordinary news. So I really don't think freedom of information is only about, serious human rights violations and things like that, even though it is important, because we should remember that most times when we have these amazing inventions and good news, so to speak, a lot of people would be willing to share that. But the news that people want to hide, that they do not want people to know, are those human rights violations, are those abuses that must be exposed. Because if we do not expose all these things that are going on, it continues. Silence, as is usually said, means consent. So which is why most times when we talk about freedom of information, we focus more, on the news that people would want to hide, but which have impact on larger society, which influences lives and can even influence generations, negatively. So that's why most times when we talk about freedom of information and freedom of expression, freedom of the press, we focus more on that aspect, but it's definitely not only limited, to human rights violations and abuse. Now, the first question, sorry, can you repeat that first question again? I'm finding it difficult to get that. The very first one.
Maybe I should speak for myself, if you can hear me.
Okay, please go ahead. Yes, I can hear you.
The first question is, how absolute or relative is the concept of freedom, especially within the digital space? Do we think that freedom should be absolute or relative? And it's on the basis of that question that I raised the second question, that do we see it in terms of just corruption, human rights? What about the issues of insecurity and security? Do we still think that freedom should be absolute in those regards?
Well, I actually believe that no matter how much we talk about press freedom is never actually absolute. Because even though we have a responsibility to inform the audience, to inform members of society what is happening within their society, we also have to be mindful of the fact that we must protect national security. We have to be mindful of how we disseminate the information, the timing, and the reaction that that information can generate. I know that the use of online space has given rise to hate speech, fake news, misinformation. And I know that some people are now calling for social media to be regulated. But then there's now the issue of how do we effectively regulate social media without muzzling press freedom? If we are filtering and blocking, the media, we'll muzzle press freedom and we'll jeopardize the status of the internet as an open space. So I believe that what we need to be calling for now is self-regulation. For some of those social media sites, the operators of those social media sites, they can come up with rules of what is acceptable to be posted on their sites and what is not acceptable for them. And for those that are also posting content on these sites, we need to look at what are their motives, how accurate are their information, how balanced is it, what are they hoping to achieve with the information that is being put out there. But at the same time, I also believe there should be free access. For the audience too, you also have a choice on what you consume. There are some sites that have been regarded as those for the liberals, for the conservatives, for the left wing. There are different kinds of sites. So it depends on what you yourself as a consumer is looking to consume that will direct which sites you would actually visit. I don't believe social media should be muzzled or regulated by government officials, because at the end of the day, everybody has an agenda. Everybody has their own rights that they want to protect. But talking about the rights of the society as a whole, I think the online space should be free. There should be free access to it. Self-regulation now comes in for the operators of the site, for those that are posting content, and even for the consumers. You decide what you want to consume, and then you look for what the information that you think benefits you as of the moment where you're seeking that information. I hope I've been able to clarify that.
Dr. Presley. Do you have a further comment?
Yes, I think I've.
Do you have a further comment?
I think I've gotten some beautiful insight. Like I said, I enjoyed your presentation. And then the issue of regulation, I'm beginning to see it from your own perspective now, which I think should be followed. For instance, not the government regulating, but the industry players regulating. So you are not saying there should be no regulation, but where does the regulation comes from? That becomes the...
And the consumers too should also consumers are not a dumping ground where you just dump anything on them. Consumers too should decide what they choose.
Yes.
So I think self-regulation
one of the concerns of those who regulate, whether from the government or industry perspective, is the level of media literacy prevalent in the society. Because if you say people should have access, unrestricted access, some persons may have access to some information that they don't even know how genuine such information are. And then they begin to spread same across. So that becomes another tricky issue. So while we're talking about regulation, whether from industry or from the government, we should equally intensify media literacy.
I agree with you. And I also think that judicial oversight is also very necessary when we're talking about regulation. In Nigeria here, most times when we have issues of libel and slander, very few people actually take such issues, to the law courts because it's very expensive, it's very time consuming. And most times they say justice delayed is justice denied. But if we have a functioning and effective justice system where anytime there's the issue of libel or maybe false information that damages people's reputation is taken up legally and justice is served, I think would also have a reduction of such incidences, whether online or offline. But the fact that most people leave everything to God here in Nigeria, I think that's also one of the challenges we are facing.
Okay, thank you very much for that insight. Dr. TOLULOPE, I can see you're raising your hand. You want to say something?
Yes. I just want to say something as a build-up. I think, thank you so much for your presentation. I think you like the aspect where you talked about implementation, actually. I think that is one of the major problems. But I just want to say that as long as the online platform is being monetized, I think people will continue to abuse every other person's freedom to use that same space. I personally don't have any issues with journalists because journalists are responsible people and they don't just release information, they are guided by principles. I'm more worried about the people that are free to just make use of the online space and they use that for their own personal interest. But as long as this online space will continue to be monetized, I think people will continue to abuse it. And that's why sometimes I feel regulating the online space is very difficult. It's very complex because you are trying to ensure that you come to a place where you are not kind of depriving people of their own freedom of expression, because we have honest people on those spaces as well. So regulating would be very difficult. But because that online space is monetized, so many people will continue to do sensational journalism and see how they can draw people in just to make money on the online space. That's just my comment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your comments. We have some members of the audience also made some comments. Mr. Tolu, please. Can you please also? Dr. TOLULOPE, can you please mute yourself? Thank you.
This comment is from Emmanuel Iziaka. So he's talking about in CBD and Huri Okonkwo were ancient means of communication through writings before the advent of colonialism by Igbo and Ibibio nations. So Chevron and other multinationals are not at ease granting interviews to academic researchers. This runs contrary to our views here. I think he was making his comments in line with Dr. Munde's presentation.
Can I also jump in here? Because
all right, okay,
Dr. TOLULOPE's question is also similar to Dr. Nzaka's position.
Yes. Please proceed.
So I can see a tie among the 3 questions or so. Yeah, well, I completely agree with you. I completely agree with both of you. Your submissions are quite valid. Yes, we encounter all of those roadblocks too. Even I did too as a researcher. But what I then did was to go through, like I said, top management. I have friends in the organization that I used. So I talked to them. I was advised to write a letter, to the top management people, and my proposal was granted coming from Pan Atlantic. Doesn't really have to be Pan Atlantic. Sometimes you have to use, I don't want to call it old boy network to open doors. You know how Nigeria is like in developing countries when it comes to research. Yeah, there's that suspicion. So your submission is very, very valid. Regarding the issue of students being denied access, for my organization, Cadbury, I try as much as I can, to give everybody an equal opportunity. At times, I may not be able to grant direct interviews. I remember a student from, like PhD student, he called me he was doing a project, so wanted an interview. I granted him the interview online. We didn't do written interview. And then another doctor at PAU, when he did his thesis, he sent his questionnaire to us in my organization. So I answered on his behalf and I sent it back to him. It's not as if we deny students access. Yes. Your position that some organizations believe such information could be available to competitors that use it against them is genuine, is valid. But in our own case, it's not like that. Maybe I have a communication and research background. That's why I'm then more amenable to receiving such requests and treating them. And then when it comes to IT, we grant students opportunity to do IT with us. Though my department is a very lean one, but being a manufacturing company, people that read microbiology, manufacturing, food and technology, engineering, perhaps sales and marketing, they get opportunities for internship with us, so they learn more about industry experience. So yeah, I share your sentiments. But with proper negotiations, you'll be able to get your way in terms of approaching someone in the organization when it comes to that, for an opportunity for the researcher to be granted access. You can use that leverage. I'm sure it will work.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mordi, for your insights. Please, can you mute yourself? Yes, thank you. And please, other members of the audience, please try and mute yourself. Please mute yourself.
I was just about to say I'm going to call you now. I was going to say I'm going to call you now.
Please, let's try and mute ourselves. Please mute yourself, please. Excuse me, please, can we mute ourselves? Can everybody please mute themselves? Okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. So please, we want to continue with this conversation, and I want to bring in Mr. Raf AKPAN. Mr. Raf AKPAN, are you there, please? Mr. Raf?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes. Thank you we thank God that you were able to join us. Yes. Now, yes. So I want to start my question. So please, I want when we talk about the National Broadcasting Commission, it's the apex regulatory body for broadcasting in Nigeria.
Yeah,
is there a link between universal access to information and broadcasting and online spaces? Is there a link between broadcast regulation and online spaces?
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Corey. From all the speakers, you will find out that there's a link, because broadcasting is a creative medium which is characterized by professionalism. And when you talk about being creative, you need to, get ideas. You need to get ideas all around from any part of the world. Okay. Now, in the area of broadcast regulation, we also we learn. Learning is a continuous thing. Regulation is not something that is a cast in stone, that it must be like this, because the environment is dynamic, broadcasting is dynamic as well. So we look around and say, okay, what is happening in other climes, or what are the things going on in other climes? So we use these online space to access other climes regulatory authorities. For instance, not too long ago, we had online meetings with some of these regulators outside the country. For instance, AKPAN, the Australian Communication and Media Authority is there. We have the Ofcom, which is in UK. We have the FCC in America. Then the Ghana Communication Commission for Ghana here. And of course, the National Broadcasting Commission, NBC, where we cross-fertilize ideas, we look at things and we say, okay, this is how regulation should go, so that it will not hinder so much on people's rights. We talked about press freedom. We talked about people having the right to access information at any time. So basically, yes, online space have a link with the broadcast regulator.
Yes, I don't know, maybe you listened to Mrs. Fagbemi when she was speaking about press freedom and the context of press freedom in Nigeria. Yeah. And it is one thing for us to talk about press freedom. It's another thing for us to talk about the freedom of information. So is there a link between online spaces and the Freedom of Information Act?
Again, yes. Now, what brought about this act, the Freedom of Information? You remember many years back, before 2012, I guess, I think that I'm right, when that act was signed. Now, before then, journalists, people find it very difficult to access some vital information, particularly from government. And the outcry made the government to come up and say, okay, let's put this act in place. So that act is there. I agree there is a link between that act and the use of the online space. The intent of that act is to ensure that Nigerians have access to government information. This will reduce the speculations that people will have. And again, it will also kind of boost the trust to some extent. I know that there's no trust again for the government, but what that act would have done is, if it is in total, that is, everybody have an access to information, I think the issue of trust would have also come in. People would have trusted the government better, and also whatever they get from any government agency will be something that they can believe in and work with. But today, what are we getting? Do we really get this information the way it's supposed to? Somebody mentioned the oath of secrecy. It's still there. It's still there. There's some information that are not meant for the general public. So that information should be protected. Okay. So I still believe that there's a link between the Freedom of Information Act and the use of the online space, really.
Yeah, thank you very much for your insights. But you see, I want to just go a bit deeper. You see, Section 16 of that act states that public authorities are to advise and assist individuals who want to seek information from the public domain. Now, do this particular section, is it being activated? Does it work? Especially when individuals want to get some information from that particular section of that particular act?
Well, I can speak for my organization, the National Broadcasting Commission, and I will say yes, that it works. If you want any kind of information, if it's not the classified one now, because I wouldn't want to give you information about a station's personnel, give you the detail about the person without the person's consent. Okay, though we have such information, we will not want to give it out. Ms. Temitope talked there. If we have our information, it will be out of place for me to give out her information without her consent. Okay, so for anyone who wants information and comes to us, we will look at what does he want to use information for, and if it's something like we talked about here, if it has to do with research or something that will not offend anybody, why not? We'll oblige. We give the information out, and we've been doing that. So I can speak for my organization. I'm telling you sincerely, we've been doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Raf Akpan, for your insights. I need to reintroduce Mr. Raf Akpan. Mr. Raf Akpan is the zonal coordinator for the National Broadcasting Commission here in Lagos State. Thank you for your perspective.
Thank you.
Dr. Mordi, are you there, please? I want to bring you into this conversation again.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, Dr. Mordi, when we talk about customers, we said customers are essential stakeholders for an organization, and they can determine the success or failure of any organization. They can make or mar any organization. How can we use the online spaces to promote customer relations?
Thank you very much. When you talk about online spaces, a whole lot of things happen there. For instance, some people go there for relationships, just to make friends and that sort of thing, or to make business contacts, or for career growth and those sort of things. You can find these sort of people on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. And then other people go there for knowledge seeking. Like you're doing research, you can go to Google to look for something, or maybe content sharing communities like YouTube. And for others, it's just service. Let's say you want to buy something on Amazon, you go online and order something and it's sent to you. So virtually online, people go there for different reasons. Once that is established, we then look at what customer relations entail. Customer relations is all about satisfying and meeting the needs of your customer. For us as an organization, I'm using Cadbury now. We have our customers that cut across different age groups and then from different areas. So how do we communicate with them? We have a company email account for our external stakeholders. So occasionally customers or consumers or other stakeholders do send us an email, requesting for information about our company or products or that sort of thing, and we respond. That's one aspect. We can equally take their phone calls. We have a dedicated line for external stakeholders to reach us, and we take our customers very, very seriously, because they are critical to our business. The customer is king. So we try as much as possible to ensure that we give our customers value. All companies, even public sector, they have social media platforms that is engaging with their customers. So we are also on social. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, even LinkedIn. We use these platforms to communicate with our customers from time to time. There is this book by two brothers. I'm sure you may know the book, Waiting for Your Cat to Back. Waiting for Your Cat to Back, written by Barry and Jeffrey Eisenberg. He talked about persuasion architecture, how you work with your customers. No longer wait for your customers to come to you. You go to your customers, you persuade them, to patronize you, so to speak. On the other hand, customers with the online era that we live in now also have unlimited access to companies. For instance, just yesterday, I think it's been trending now, a customer bought a Risco tomato paste. The customer bought a Risco tomato paste and made some comments on it on Facebook. However, the company didn't seem to like the review. Perhaps it felt was done in bad taste. The company then allegedly invited the police to lock up this customer.
Wow.
It was on Arise Television. It crept from online platform to mainstream platform. So Arise Television interviewed the DG of FCCPC yesterday. That is Babatunde Rukera. FCCPC is Federal Competitiveness Consumer Protection Council. So, well, Mr. Rukera said he reached out to the police upon hearing the news. You can see how viral information is online. Just one small post by the lady customer of Erisco went viral and she was allegedly locked up. FCCPC picked it up and then they called the police. The police claimed ignorance of the matter. They called the company and ordered the company to immediately release the young lady, and she was released. So I think it was on television, Arise TV yesterday, to talk about it. So essentially what I'm driving at is, these days where you have online space, there's so much activities going on there. Companies can no longer afford to be complacent. Yeah, so those that have access to social media platforms as organizations should keep monitoring this. And then there must be a strategic and intentional way of communicating with your customers. You don't just go about slamming the sledgehammer on them. I'm not sure Erisco has very good corporate communications department. Those things would have been handled offline. You know, they would have reached out to the lady to resolve the matter amicably offline. Yeah, so to answer your question, yes, online spaces can be utilized to build your customer relations, but must be done strategically and intentionally so that there's no backlash. Corporate communications people should always be monitoring activities that go on online. And then when you have good news to you share with your customers. If you launch new products or you have other activities in organization that you think are newsworthy, you can equally share them online so your customers see and have an idea of what you are doing. They can engage with you, like you, follow you, share your posts and comments. So that's my take on this.
Yes, thank you for that insight. I like the perspective and the context you've actually captured in your submission. Now, I want us to take it a bit deeper, because when we talk about corporate communication, you mentioned it, the issue of crisis. We talk about issue of conflict. We talk about the issue of CSR. What are the mechanisms that can be used, especially because you say we have to be strategic about this? What mechanisms can we use to be strategic about using the online space, especially in the area of corporate communication, when addressing issues that have to do with crisis, when addressing issues that have to do with conflict, when you're addressing issues that have to do with corporate social responsibility?
Thank you very much. For the mechanisms, I essentially will be looking at channels of communication. If you look at this popular forum called Nairaland, I'm sure all of us on this call know Nairaland. It's a very, very good platform for engaging with your consumers. No, for engaging with your publics. Let me use publics. Publics is brother. On Nairaland, you could even get unsolicited posts about your company. They could post something about maybe a new product launch or maybe something good or bad about your company. So as a corporate communication practitioner, you then get to understand the various platforms. When you mention mechanisms, you are referring to platforms that people use to communicate online, because we're looking at online space in this conversation. So look at the popular online media that people use to communicate and then follow them on those online platforms. Apart from Nairaland, you also have Facebook. A lot of companies have activities on Facebook, and they have a lot of followers. When they share content, their followers like post, comments and those sort of things. So I think the channels of communication are very critical here when it comes to mechanisms for reaching out to your consumers. You have to know the particular platforms that your consumers or your publics use. Follow them on those platforms. Be proactive, don't be reactive. When you have great content to share, go ahead on these platforms and share them.
Yes, thank you for your perspective. I actually want to ask you another question, but I want you to just think about it because I'll get back to you on it. When we talk about, you talk about the customers, and we know that the customers can be in different architecture. We talk about the demographics, we talk about the psychographics, we talk about the geography. So because when we talk about the northern part of Nigeria, the southwest part of Nigeria, some of these particular social media platforms are not actually penetrated, or they don't have internet access to them. So I want you to think around this, because I'm going to come back to you about this particular question. Mrs. Temitope, are you there, please?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Mrs. Temitope, I want to ask you another question. Please, you know, when we talk about citizen journalism, we say citizen journalism has to do with when citizens engage in news gathering and news dissemination. How have the mainstream media incorporated citizen journalism, especially in the area of online spaces?
Well, I think right now, mainstream journalists, there's no doubt they have to collaborate with citizen journalism, because to a large extent, there's been a reversal of roles. You know, most people now can get information online before they even get it from the traditional media, because the process of news gathering, news selection, verifying, you know, editing and putting it out for traditional media is actually very painstaking. But most times, the news that you get online is very quick, sometimes might not be accurate, or there might be some missing pieces, or there might be need for further investigation, which is why for those that are saying that the online spaces will soon overtake the traditional media and the traditional media will soon be extinct, to a very large extent, I doubt if that is actually true, because we still need a lot of verification, we still need a lot of work, you know, to actually confirm the information that is out there online. But there's no doubt, you know, that mainstream journalists and citizen journalists are now collaborating. Sometimes what the mainstream media reports would have broken, you know, on the internet first. It would have been put out there online. And sometimes the very first people, the eyewitnesses, you need their account for those that were on the scene when something happened. For instance, maybe an accident occurred, you know, and the people that were there, that were able to get pictures, that were able to get videos, that were involved in the rescue, you know, you need to speak with them, you need to collaborate with them. Also, if you're going to be talking about events happening in other parts of the world, I'm sure you notice that a lot of, you know, mainstream media, television stations in Nigeria here, a lot of them have, you know, correspondents in other parts of the world. Some of them are not necessarily trained traditional journalists, you know, the way some of us went to school, learned journalism and all. Some of them are citizen journalists. Some of them are freelance journalists who are just, you know, doing this because they have access to the internet. They have devices through which they can get information, they can record news, and they can share. So there's collaboration definitely between the mainstream traditional journalist and the citizen journalist. And the internet has made things easier because you can have an online newsroom, unlike those days when everybody has to gather in a particular room, you know, to meet and then gather news and then discuss what we are going to do with this news. You don't necessarily have to gather in a physical space. We can have online meetings. Editing can even be done online. Now we have a lot of apps, we have a lot of tools that are helping with editing. Sometimes it could be a blessing and a curse. We know that autocorrect sometimes, you know, it can put you in a lot of trouble if you are not careful. So of course there are advantages, there are disadvantages, but there's no doubt, you know, that there's collaboration. Internet has shrunk the distance between amateur and professional journalists as they are working together right now for mutual benefit. They are trying as much as possible to provide the truest news in the quickest way possible. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way and they drop the ball, but I think that's where we now fall back on the traditional news media, you know, to fill in the gaps of what the internet cannot provide in the news process.
Yes, thank you for that insight. Is there a further link with citizen journalism and digital journalism? Because you find out that a number of mainstream newspapers have now incorporated the digital journalism model. We find that they have audio version, they have the video version and the print version all in one document and all in one platform. Is there a link between citizen journalism and digital journalism?
Well, I think there's a link between citizen journalism and digital journalism, because I think it's very clear for those that want to be honest and very truthful, that the youthful generation most times would prefer to access their news online than to sit down and probably watch TV or listen to radio. And if you're not keen into that market, then we talk about journalism, we talk about providing information and all, but at the end of the day, too, we are in the business of making profit. So definitely there's a relationship between citizen journalism and the digital space, because the younger generation, they want to get everything. Their phone, really, they can get everything they need on their phone. They can get the videos, they can get the pictures, they can get the newscasts, they can get everything. So that is why the mainstream traditional media is also keen into that, And there's also the avenue for marketing. You can market your organization properly online. You can also give room for adverts. People also generate income for every click that is made on their page. So there's definitely a relationship. I would say that, and the traditional media, they are keen into it.
Thank you so much for that insight. Mr. AKPAN, are you there, please?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes, thank you, Mr. AKPAN. The National Broadcasting Commission usually publish this document, the Nigerian Broadcasting Codes. Yes, and I believe there is a Nigerian Broadcasting Code on the use of online spaces. Can you enlighten us about this, please?
Well, for now, we are presently using the 6th edition of the Nigerian Broadcasting Code.
Yes, 2016,
and that
yes.
code, while the code was being put in place, the issue of online broadcasting was not really given the kind of a prominence that is being given now. Okay. In that code, there's just few sections of the code that talked about online broadcasting, and that was the reason an addendum, if you can recall, sometimes last 2 years ago, an addendum to the code was released, which many people kicked against, and that we were taken to court, and that addendum was dropped. Okay. Now we are working on the review of this 6th edition of the code, which will now encompass other aspects of broadcasting. The online may come in. Now, for that online, the NBC is not working in isolation. The NBC is working with other agencies like the NITDA, the NCC, and other sister agencies. And we are collaborating to see how we can come up with regulations that will not infringe on people's rights, and however, will let people know that as you go online, there are a lot of responsibility on you as a citizen of this country, the responsibility of ensuring that there is national security. Whatever you push online should be of the interest of the people, and it shouldn't be to the detriment of the nation. It shouldn't be against the national security. And again, the national unity. Someone talked about hate. And hate is a very critical aspect that the commission, the National Broadcasting Commission, will not be doing. We don't joke with it. On the traditional media, any hate comment attract a Class A offense, which is a severe one. And even the code states it clearly. It says hate speech is prohibited. Okay, so on this, the code we are presently using does not have enough provisions that could help us look at how we could, control now. I won't say regulate it now. To control, or probably let me say to guide. Yes, to guide the use of the online media. But let's see what will come up after the collaboration with these sister agencies and see what the regulations will be like. And once that is done and is incorporated in the 7th edition of the code, then we'll see how that will come to play. However, let me quickly say, self-regulation is key. Everybody needs to know that, look, if Nigeria is good today, is to the benefit of everybody. If it is bad as a result of what you push on the platform, and there's a reaction, incites to violence, and there is a problem, the person who even push it, if you are in Nigeria, then you are not also free. Your people are there outside, wherever they may be. When the crisis comes up, do you know where your children are? They may be in school when that thing starts. Where is your wife or your husband at that point in time? So we should be mindful of all this. We should have that responsibility on us. Whatever we do, let's always know that there is consequence for anything we are going to do. So I will call on, like someone said, media literacy is very, very key. Very, very important. I don't know what the national orientation is doing. I think in this aspect, there should be more about talking to people. Let people know that, look, if you go online, you have the freedom. Yes, you are free to go online, do whatever you want to do. However, don't let your right infringe on another person's right. Okay, there should be a kind of social re-engineering. People should know more about what this platform is for. It's a good thing. It has come to stay. Digital technology has come to stay. We cannot run away from that. It is a challenge to us. How do we face this challenge? These are the things that we are now looking at, and we think with time we will get it.
Thank you very much for that insight. You actually touched on the aspect of hate speech when you were explaining the broadcasting code. Are there other ethical protocols that we should consider when using these online spaces?
Yes. What about fake news, misinformation, disinformation? You see, digital technology makes it very easy to manipulate anything. I will give you an instance. There was a time where I was in a committee to monitor some things online, and somebody posted something. Because we're in an online space, I won't want to give more details about that committee, what we're doing then. Now, somebody posted something online, and it says, this is happening now in Enugu. And it was a woman that was seriously battered. She was in the pool of her blood, and it was posted online and says, this is happening now in Enugu. Invariably, they were saying that, and that woman happens to be from another tribe. So they were now trying to instigate the other tribe to incite the other tribe into coming up for a reprisal attack. So when we saw that video, we looked at it critically. After thorough investigation, it happens to be a road accident, not in Nigeria, but as far as Uganda. And somebody pushed it and said it was happening in Enugu. So these are the dangers that we are facing. So for hate, for fake news, fake narratives, we should. That's why I said people need to be educated. People need to be educated. People have different intents. Wow. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Dr. Korea?
We can hear you, but there's a noise from the background. Okay, it has stopped.
Great. Now, people have different intents of going online to push anything. Okay, so that is why verifying our source, verifying the information is very, very important. Before you even use, before you share, it is very important. And bad news travels further. People see that, oh, this is happening there, and it's pushed, and we are not, without even verifying to find out whether it is true. So in the code, what are we talking about? Is there any ethical thing? Or what I think that should be there is that the people should be responsible to themselves, one, to other people, and of course to the nation. Okay, because if you say, let me put something here, it's going to infringe on people's rights. That is the truth. That is the truth. I thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Akpan. Thank you for those insights and perspectives. I really appreciate those submissions. Thank you. Dr. TOLULOPE, are you still there, please?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, yes. Okay, Dr. TOLULOPE, you listened to Mr. Akpan, and he mentioned the aspect of information literacy. Is there a link between information literacy and online spaces?
I want to speak based on what is happening currently. So if I'm going to answer that question, I would say there is no link presently. There should be a link, but there is no link presently. And I think it's because, you know, sometimes when we use this term, and I think the term has come to stay, where people say online journalism, or when people refer to those that have blogs as bloggers, those that have blogs, sorry, as journalists. I find a problem with that because I see the term, and I think that's why sometimes when you go out there, just almost anybody and everybody can practice as a journalist, which I think does not give enough respect for people that actually go to school to study this. So when you say media literacy, yes, it's necessary, but is it the norm, especially on the online space like you have previously stated? It is not. And to be honest, and I want to be realistic now, and I'm always realistic based on the research we carry out frequently, and we kind of understand the current discussions and issues that surround information dissemination, especially on the online space. The reality is no one is interested in media literacy, to be honest, especially people that are not professional journalists. I don't even want to call them journalists because once they do not understand the implication or sensitivity, like we were taught in school, or like we're teaching our students now about the impact or the implication of the information you are sending out. Online users do not want to be responsible. And I keep saying this, it's just because as even page owners, there were few publications that I did with one of my professors like 3 years ago, and it was holding online space owners or blog owners, whatever you call them, responsible for the information they disseminate. And I'm also excited that one of the speakers talked about, from Channels TV, talked about the fact that they need to begin to hold these people accountable, especially in Nigeria. If you don't hold them accountable, they will not self-regulate their platforms. And the reason is this. I think if you know what takes place when it comes to having a channel on YouTube or whatever, the money is important. That's why they are on that space in the first place. Not necessarily because of the information. They're not passionate about information like we are as journalists. So they will not. I think it will take a long time for them to become responsible and self-regulate because of the money value they're going to get from that online space. Why do you want me to have or create an online space where I am not bringing sensational information on it? Because that is what they will tell you, bad news sells. That is what attracts. Fake news also sells. That's what we attract engagement. That is what we bring in audience. The engagement will skyrocket, and then I have money in the bank. So that's why people don't want to be responsible. So whether we pay attention to information literacy, it's relevant, yes, to those that we take to it, but because the financial benefits still stands on the online space, so many people will refuse to be responsible about the information they disseminate. And I think one of the major things that could be done, like one of our guests said, is to actually bring those people to book. When you begin to do that, probably others will begin to sit up. So once you are doing that, you're kind of regulating the platform, but you're not depriving people of free speech or freedom. Then I also want to say this, you know, when this concept of, what's it called now? When this concept of hate speech came into life, the first thing I asked myself was, what is the definition of hate speech to me and to you? It's very subjective, very, very subjective, and sometimes difficult for you to even bring somebody to punish someone based on the statement someone has made. Even by whatever definition has been given, it's very difficult for us to interpret what hate speech should be because it is subjective. So talking about information literacy, yes, it is necessary. Is it in practice? Maybe. How is the reception rate? I would be glad to say maybe 5%. Only the responsible people, which in most cases are professional journalists. I think is the word that is allowing me to use that term, professional journalist, because if you are not responsible for the information you are disseminating, I don't even see you as a journalist, and I don't believe you should be called a journalist. That you just put information online without verifying it or without doing proper investigation or being responsible for the information you are putting out can never make you a journalist. That you disseminate information does not make you a journalist. And I think we should not use that word again. So information literacy, it is necessary, and I think we should push it more. Maybe some people will repent one day and they'll begin to accept the need for that. But them accepting that the need for that over monetary value is what I doubt in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your insights. Dr. Mordi, are you there, please?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes. Can you still remember my question I need to think about?
Yeah, you're talking about we're going offline now, how we can engage with customers offline.
Yes.
People who do not have access to online spaces or social media platforms.
Yes, please proceed.
Was that the one you're referring to? Okay, yeah. I confined my answer then to online spaces, since that was that's essentially what we're discussing here. But since you mentioned it, why not? Now, for our customers, like you said, perhaps in the northern part of the country, or those that do not have that literacy to be on online spaces, we do face-to-face communication with them. We do market visits. As I'm referring to my company now, we have customers across the different geopolitical zones. So periodically, maybe quarterly, we visit them, to interact with them, find out how they are doing, what they need from us, and what we need from them, that sort of thing. We occasionally then do face-to-face town halls too with them, and then we do customer forum. We hold various customer fora, where we discuss issues pertaining to the business, and occasionally we give awards to our deserving customers. So apart from the online spaces, we also engage with our customers offline. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it answers the question a bit, but I just need to reframe the question. Now, looking at online spaces, how can we use online spaces, especially in the area of inclusion and diversity? Because we find that when you look at the gender, we talk about male and female. And when you look at the female itself, you have to look at the demographics. You talk about the teenagers, you talk about the young adults, you talk about the adults, you talk about the old adults. So these are different groups of people, and these different groups of people have different platforms they use. For example, you talk about the young teenagers we call Generation Alpha. They pay so much attention to TikTok compared to the Generation Z, which pays so much attention to Instagram and TikTok. And if you find the older generation, you find out that they pay so much attention to Facebook. So looking at it from these different perspectives and looking at the different types of product organization offer, what is your expert opinion in the area of using online spaces for diversity and inclusion?
Okay, thank you very much. When we mention diversity and inclusion, we don't just refer to just gender. There are other aspects when it comes to, essentially it is DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this term is no longer a buzzword, but it's a reality in today's world, particularly those of us that work for multinational companies. We have different employees across different countries, different geographical locations. So I'm not just using Nigeria as an example now. I'm going outside the shores of Nigeria, people from different races, different culture, and even language. Language is a barrier to when it comes to communicating with your stakeholders. Yes, you mentioned the TikTok generation, the Facebook people, those fall under one of the elements of diversity, which is age or generational differences. But we must not lose sight of the other aspects too, like race, culture, and language.
Sure.
Language is very critical. Not everyone in my organization speaks English. You have some that speak Chinese, and there are a whole lot of them that speak only Chinese. You have the Indians too, then people that speak only French. We've had virtual meetings where you have people from different geographical locations joining, and you find it difficult to sometimes converse with people who speak French, who don't understand or just understand only a smattering of English. We then have to tailor our conversations accordingly. We have what we call virtual town halls. We do this every quarter, where the group CEO based in America will talk to all employees across different geographical locations. I think there are opportunities for translation of what he's saying so that others will hear and see what he's saying. So apart from generational differences, psychographics and demographics, we have language differences too, as far as diversity and inclusion is concerned. So we're able to tailor our comms, our communication to different audiences. We have intranet too. Intranet, not internet now. Intranet is a global repository of information about the company. We post content there about our policy, those sort of things, even activities, news. We put them on the intranet for people to read in their own language. If you're Russian, you can click on it and read it in Russian. And then, so those are some of the things that but just to let you know, diversity and inclusion is very critical to us as an organization. In fact, it's embedded in our DNA. We have this policy of managing gender equality. In our board of directors in Nigeria, we have almost equal representation of male and female gender. It's not the regulatory authorities encourage companies to have more women on their board. We've gone beyond the 30% benchmark to almost 50%. Diversity and inclusion is really very, very important. Let me give a simple example. I'll tell a very short story. In the year 2000, a judge in Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States, ordered Coca-Cola, the sovereign giants that we know, to pay nearly 2,000 of his Black employees almost $200 million. What happened? There was class action by these employees. A lawyer sued on their behalf over purported racial discrimination practices against these workers in the workplace. And Coca-Cola paid that money. That was the highest amount of money a company would have paid them, a fine for over racial discrimination. And the judge also mandated that, this is a very important one, the judge mandated that Coca-Cola must train its staff, employees, on how to manage diversity and inclusion in the workplace. So I'm sure corporate communicators in Coca-Cola will be saddled with that responsibility to drop those training programs and then how to communicate with these people. We also have Yama. Yama is internal Facebook organizations used to communicate. Again, because of our language differences, the Yama is in different languages, for different regions. So these are some of the processes that we use in managing our diversity and inclusion. Like Roosevelt Thomas said, Roosevelt Thomas said that creating and managing a diverse workforce is a process and not a destination. We keep learning every day. So essentially, that's how we manage our DE and I from the corporate communications perspective.
Thank you so much for your insights. Thank you so much. I need to bring the audience in. If you want to ask questions, you can type it as a text, or you can raise your hand and we'll call you. So please, we have 4 speakers here. We have Dr. Frederick Mordi, we have Mr. AKPAN is here. Mr. Raf AKPAN is here. We also have Mrs. Temitope, Fagbemi, and we also have Dr. TOLULOPE, KAYODE-ADEDEJI. So please, you can ask your questions, or you can also send your text, please. If you want to ask a question, please raise your hands, please. Questions? Huh? Is it text? Huh? You have text? Okay, please proceed.
All right, I think this particular question is directed to Mr. AKPAN. So I think he wants to know what personal regulation means. Like, how do we define self-regulation in the Nigerian terms? So that's from Mr. Emmanuel Zeka. I think it's directed to Mr. AKPAN. So how do we define self-regulation in the Nigerian terms? Mr. AKPAN, are you there, sir?
All right, thank you. It's very simple. Is you knowing what you are doing. Tell yourself, if you say, I won't do this, and you stand by it, that is self-regulation. It's a control you put upon yourself that, okay, before, for instance, on this, looking at the context of what we are talking about now, if you say, before I push anything online, I must verify and be sure that what I'm pushing is from a credible source, it is correct, and it is factual. Once you do that, it's a responsibility on you to say, okay, I'm not going to push anything that I am not sure of. You know, there's this balance in our profession. When you are in doubt, leave out. Now, for self-regulation, when you are in doubt, don't do it. Get what you are doing, know what you are doing, and be sure of what you are doing. That is a simple way I think I can define self-regulation now.
All right, thank
Can
you
I
very much,
also add
Dr.
to
Pan.
it, please?
All right, go ahead.
I think that when we are talking about self-regulation, we should also be very careful of the broadcast messages that we usually forward anyhow. You know, most of those messages you cannot verify. Sometimes you do not know the source. You know, you just see forwarded as received, and then you are forwarding. You really need to be very careful. You don't have to forward. And if you must forward those messages, verify. That's if you must forward. That's an aspect of, self-regulation. I also think we need to be patriotic, love of country. I know how difficult things are now. People usually say, in Nigeria will happen to you. Things are quite difficult. But, as a press warrior, using the words of Dr. Nelson Okori, I've covered extensively, I haven't worked on the foreign desk, I've covered extensively the war in Syria, in Yemen, Libya, Ukraine, from a distance, of course. I've never actually been there on the scene. But I know that, war is not something you casually call for. People call for revolution, and speak like, just get on the streets, turn things upside down, and everything will turn out right. We've seen that's not true. Look at all the countries that were involved in the Arab Spring. How many of them are actually out of the woods now? But at the same time, am I saying that we should sit down and accept incompetent leadership? No, I'm not saying that. But I'm just saying we have to caution ourselves. We have to be very careful. The messages we are pushing out, the agenda that we are unconsciously, because there are some people that are pushing these messages and this agenda. And if you're not careful, you'll be part of those helping them to push it. We have to be very careful what we are calling for. We have to refrain from exaggeration, from over sensationalizing. We have to be very careful. We have to examine our motives. Every time you want to post online or you want to forward, examine your motive. What do you want to achieve with this? What are you contributing in terms of nation building? We can't leave everything to our leaders. That's where self-regulation comes in. Thank you.
All right, Mrs. Temitope, thank you very much. So there's another one from Comfort. So I think it's on media literacy. I guess it's directed to Dr. TOLULOPE. So The question is, what is the way forward with media literacy, since it appears to be a lone subject and not deliberately integrated into the different academic courses being put forward in the academia? Are you there, Mrs. TOLULOPE? I mean, Dr. TOLULOPE, can you react to that, please? Dr. TOLULOPE? I think it's
Dr. TOLULOPE, please unmute yourself. If there's another question, please.
all right.
Okay.
All right, okay. While we wait for Dr. TOLULOPE's reaction, there's another one from Emmanuel Ziaka. I guess it's directed to Mr. AKPAN. So it says, a known politician used fake news extensively during political campaigns and was not reprimanded. Is the law for the common people? So Mr. AKPAN, can you react to that, please?
Can you please read the question again, please?
All right. He said a known politician used fake news extensively during political campaigns and was not reprimanded. Is the law for the common people?
Was it on the campaign ground or on radio or television? These are the issue. The information, I mean, the question is not so clear. If it's on the campaign ground, well, nobody forced you to go to a campaign ground. Anybody can say anything there. But if it's on the radio or on the television, there's a regulator who listens to those things. And again, we may not know everything. It is after some time that we now find out that, oh, what that person says was actually wrong, was not true. Then we will draw the attention of the station to it. So the law is not made, it's made for everyone. So whether a politician or anybody, there must be a sense of responsibility. Just the bottom line here. We must have that sense of responsibility. Someone comes on and says something that is not true, and if you know that is not true, come out and say, sorry, what this person says was not true, and you come up with the facts. So that is if it was on a campaign ground, well, there's nothing I can say. But if it is something that was on radio or television, which we regulate, I will say, well, once we get that, we will find out why the station didn't do anything to that. If indeed the station is aware that whatever that person was saying was actually a fake.
All right, thank you, Mr. AKPAN. Yeah, thank you for the insightful comment. So there are other series of questions from Julius Adeguno. So I think any member of the panel can react to this. So the digital age is very diverse and dynamic, as there are different new things every moment. How do we maintain regular tab in learning and understanding? Then how can we maximize the training opportunities? What opportunities should we be looking for? So I think any member of the panel can actually pick that up and react to it. Mrs. Temitope, you want to react to it?
Well, I'm not really so sure about that. I think Dr. TOLULOPE would be able to do a better, job on that. I'm not so sure about that.
All right.
All right.
You don't know okay, Dr. TOLULOPE.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. You're welcome.
Okay. Thank
Hello, Dr. TOLULOPE. I think I need to work or something. While we wait for Dr. Mundi, do you want to react to some of the questions asked by Mr. Julius?
I'm trying to scroll through the question once more.
Okay, towards the end, yeah, I think she's
okay. It's talking about the digital age being very diverse and dynamic, new things coming up every moment. How do we maintain regular tab in learning and understanding? How do we maximize the training opportunities? What opportunities should we be looking for? I'll answer this from my own organizational perspective. Like we say, we learn every day. If the day we stop learning, the day we die. The digital age, that's the information age we live in now. They say in the digital economy, information is the currency. For us as an organization, we keep trying to adapt to changes, as they come up. We hold regular trainings for our staff in various areas, not only digital learning. Yeah, so these trainings are really very critical for us so that we are constantly on top of the game. We do not miss out on the trends and the information literacy world. I think that's how I'll put it. For us as an organization, we have a learning culture in place embedded for every member of staff to learn about new things, not just only things digital, learn about other things to keep abreast of development. And for me as a person, I belong to the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations. We hold our regular monthly meetings where we bring in resource persons or experts to talk to us about various aspects, particularly new trends, artificial intelligence, using ChatGPT to generate your press releases and all of that. The challenges that new technology like AI, ChatGPT will pose to us as information managers. So we do all of these things as professional, to manage our professional profiles. So I think that's how I'll answer it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those insights. I think we have more questions, but before we take the questions, because we're already out of time, and I believe that Mr. Adegoke is around. Mr. Adegoke, are you around, please?
Yes, I am. Dr.
Yes.
Nelson, I'm here.
Yes, okay. We're hoping you would have joined us earlier enough. However, we are still happy that you're here. So that's a quick one, please. When we talk about NIMSI, you are actually the Director of Corporate Communication for the National Identity Management Commission. And when your commission focuses more on identity management, can you please link online spaces with identity management? Just in 2 minutes, please, because we're already out of time.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you, Dr. Nelson, and thanks to the organizer of this colloquium. Well, when you look at the online space, like so many other speakers have spoken, for NIMSI, we have tried as much as possible to make use of the online space to disseminate information. And by the way, let me state this. NIMSI does not communicate only to the Nigerian audience, but also to international audience. Why? Because we have Nigerians in the diaspora who want to have access to the NIN, and therefore they need information. So constantly on all our online platforms, most especially on our website, we update information that are very key and critical to the enrollment of Nigerians, either locally or in the diaspora for the NIN. And there is something I want us to know. The national identification number, the data within it or the information is not expected to be shared online. That's a personal data. But for us, when you go to any of our online space, we only share information about the commission, about what we do, about how to get your NIN, and about other services. But when it comes to the NIN, because we have seen cases where people say, oh, I want to know the NIN of this person, or I want to know the date of birth of this person, we don't. Because as part of the security architecture of the NIN, and as part of national security, the NIN of an individual or the data within it are not meant to be discussed or shown on online platform. However, we have seen cases recently, and it's on the rise, whereby people are now fixing individual information through the online platforms, and we have come out to disclaim a whole lot of them. So for us in NIMSI, the online platform affords us the opportunity to talk not only to Nigerians and legal residents here, but also to our international to Nigerians in the diaspora or our international partners. And when you look through NIMSI platforms, like one of the speakers said, and I'll put it this way, I think there is a migration. Like we said, the older generation want to be on the Facebook, while the Gen Z for the Instagram, while the new generation are for TikTok. For us in NIMSI, we have all these platforms available. So whatever generation you belong to, the information are constantly shared on this platform. And the new DG, that's Engineer Biso Yekoka, has told us that we must not withhold any information that are needed by Nigerians and legal residents for them to get the NIM and also to access government services. So for us at NIMSI, we have done our best and will continue to improve. But like I said earlier, Dr. Nelson, we have noticed an upsurge in phishing of information of NIM holders on the online space. So we have come out to debunk it severally that if it's not NIMSI official platform, Nigerians and legal residents should not share their data with anyone, because what they are trying to do now is to harvest information and use it for whatever purpose they want to use it. So for us in NIMSI, we have come out to disclaim that and will continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adegoke. I just want to ask a very quick question. Are there ways NIMSI can actually collaborate with the private sector and the public sector in the area of identity management? Because currently we have a number of image search platforms. We have facial recognition tools now, a number of them in many developed societies. Are there ways NIMSI can actually work hand in hand with a number of these companies in the private and public sector in the area of identity management?
Okay, at present, we are collaborating with both the public sector and the private sector. We have a lot of collaboration going on, for instance, with the NIPS. NIPS is in charge of the BVN. So we started the collaboration like 4 or 5 years ago. We're also collaborating with the CBN and also the banks through the CBN as well. Then we're also collaborating with the public sector like the Population Commission, the PENCOM, the Correctional Service, the Immigration, and so on and so forth. Now, what we are trying to do now is what we call the collapse of identity sector, and to ensure that NIMSI drives it. And that's what we call the harmonization. So the harmonization process is part of our collaboration with the private sector. When you look at in the next few weeks, NIMSI and NIPS will come out with a new card. We call it a payment card layered on identity. So it's part of the ongoing collaboration. And also, we're also collaborating with some banks. I don't want to mention names for privacy's sake. So what we want to do is for you to just walk into any of the banks, get your name, instead of coming to NIMSI. And also on the online space, in the next couple of weeks, you begin to see sharing of information between NIMSI and the private sectors, and also between NIMSI and the public sector. We have started that with the Corporate Affairs Commission. When you go to the CSC online platform, they talk more about NIMSI. They talk about the need. We are also doing that for them. When you go to immigration, that is also ongoing. So for us in NIMSI, it's a must we collaborate, and it's a must we harmonize existing data, so that data, instead of you enrolling for BVN or doing this, you just get your NIN, and with your NIN, the NIBS, CBN, and so on can just get your information without having multiple identity. So the collaboration is ongoing, and it's a must. It's a must.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, please, I want the panelists, the members of panel, to make their closing comment, starting from Mrs. Temitope Fagbemi. Are you there, please? Your closing comment on this particular subject.
Okay, yes, I'm there. And I would just like to react in closing to a comment I saw there where somebody put there that the government should also be patriotic, that it shouldn't be on us at all times. I agree, definitely. I mean, but one thing I want us to know, is the fact that we have very little control over the behavior of others. What we actually have within our own control is our own behavior. So you must not say because the government is not acting right, that you yourself will not act right. That means the society will be chaos. There will be, conflict. It's a recipe for disaster for you to say you are only going to act based on the action of the government, especially when we do know that we have we have challenges when it comes to leadership and government here in Nigeria. So what we can only do is we can only try as much as possible to hold the government accountable. We will continue to call them out. But don't forget also, I'm talking about online spaces, that even though citizen journalism is actually
Mrs. Temitope, are you there? Okay.
I think she's having network issues.
Network issues, yes. So I'll still get back to her. Is Dr. TOLULOPE there? Dr. TOLULOPE, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, please. We missed you a while. Please, can you actually make your closing comments and also respond to some of the questions that were asked directly to you?
Okay, let me just quickly answer this. The person asked 3-in-1 questions. So, and I think it's still the same answer. The same answer being that I think it will be, and I think it should be, and I think it's only reasonable to be the media establishment or the media community that can do this in terms of maintaining regular tabs when it comes to learning. The only thing we're doing now is we are just training ourselves, but for that information literacy, because we're not the only ones using the online space, other people are using it as well. And even as they are feeding us with societal issues that are prominent in the mind of our audiences, we're able to tap into that as people in the media industry to kind of determine or inform what we broadcast or issues that we draw light to. So I will still say media. And your last question there, which also says, how can we maximize the training opportunities? You can only maximize it when the media industry or the media community, they are the one in charge of it, because they have the professionalism and they have the experience to be able to kind of educate you as to the implication of the information you pass out there. So I think the media community answers all your questions from the first, second, and third question that you asked. Now, in closing, I would just like to say that it's important for us all to understand how difficult it is to regulate the online space. However, it is possible. Now, do I see anything beneficial when it comes to the online space? Absolutely, yes. Beneficial to individuals, beneficial when it comes to bringing to life societal issues and issues that concern the people. You see, the media is making use of the online space so much now to understand and know the kind of discussions that they should bring to life on their programs and issues that they should be discussed. In essence, back in the days when the online space was not there, it was difficult for us to have, as media personnel or people in the media industry, to have easy access to some of this information that we are getting on the online space. So yes, I love the online space, and I think it should also be a free platform for people to operate. However, saying that, I still feel that I still believe strongly that there are ways to regulate and exempt the professionals. So this law can apply, but it does not apply to this category of people. I think that will be possible for the purpose of regulation. Then when you say self-regulation, I still believe that once the online platform is monetized, believe me, every other person who is not a journalist, who will not, or who is not at the moment with the way Nigeria is going, who is not held responsible by the law, some of which exist, some of which are still being discussed and yet to exist on paper. Once you don't implement it, others will not sit up. And I think we need to begin to be very, very cautious of, very, very intentional about implementing some of these laws that are just on paper. And I'll close with this example. There were a group of young people that kind of did a kind of dangerous stunt on YouTube platform in America. I don't remember the year now. And they were arrested and persecuted for that. Even though it was operating on the online space, it was regarded as a crime. So I think that kind of says something to me that, oh, Tolu, you have to be careful with what you post and what you say online. But I'm going to end with that, it is important for the online space to be regulated, but with exceptions to some persons that are in the media industry. But we need to begin to implement some of these regulations that exist on paper so that people can begin to kind of be responsible. It's done in America. And there was a time they called the owner of Facebook to order. So I think it can be done in Nigeria. But some people are also of the opinion that because we did not create the online space, it might probably be impossible for us to regulate the online space. But I believe we can, but to an extent where it will not infringe on my rights as just a person, not a journalist now, to actually use the online space. I think as media practitioners, we are giving some of this sensational, I don't want to call them journalists, too much freedom and liberty. And once they do that, everybody talks about the professional journalists as those not doing their job. So it's rubbing off negatively on our own profession. And I think it's time for us to sit up and do something about that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Dr. Fred Moody, are you there, please? Dr. Frederick Moody?
Yes, I'm here.
Please, your closing comment, just briefly in a minute.
Okay, I'll wrap it up. Thank you, first of all, for the opportunity, and then quite very robust discussion we have had today from all the panelists. My take is very simple. Online space will continue to increase. Access to information will continue to increase. For us in corporate communications, we have to also continue to up our game so that we are able to keep up with the fast pace of information superhighway that we're driving these days. So in a nutshell, we'll continue to monitor trends in the online space as they evolve and then deal with them adequately. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moody. Mrs. Temitope Fagbemi, are you there, please? Are you there? Okay, we don't have her here. Mr. AKPAN, Mr. Ralph AKPAN, Mr. Ralph?
Yeah.
Yes, please, your closing comment, just in a minute, please.
Okay. First, I must congratulate the organizer of this very important gathering. It is indeed timely. And again, to all the panelists, the discussion was quite robust and the issues raised are noted. I want to say clearly that Nigerian broadcasting shall match the best anywhere in the world, but distinctly Nigerian, projecting the best and discouraging the worst in the society. And by so doing, whatever we as broadcasters are going to put out to the people must not be the one that will discourage the people or that will incite the people. Let's be conscious of what we do. Let's be mindful of the unity of this nation. Let's also know that where our own right ends, that is where other people's rights might begin. So I want to say thank you so much for the opportunity given to me to contribute in this very important gathering. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Adegoke, are you there, please?
Yes, I'm here, sir.
Please, your closing comment in just in a minute, please.
Okay, let me thank the organizer for this wonderful discussion, and also the panelists have learned quite a lot. I must say this as my closing remark. The online space is evolving and developing every day. And I think corporate communicators all over the world should understand that the world is moving from the traditional media to the online space. And we must constantly evolve. I must constantly devise ways of reaching out to the heterogeneous audience, irrespective of where they are. But at the same time, we also must be careful the kind of information we put out. Number one, the fact that we have the Freedom of Information Act in Nigeria, that does not mean that information that are likely to cause chaos, that are likely to bring, that are likely to be hate speeches, that are likely to bring disrepute to an individual should be guided. We should not just dish out any information. From NIMSI perspective, any information or data regarding the need of an individual can never be put up in an online space. But I believe that going forward, the online space is there for us to harness and be able to communicate effectively. I use the word effectively to our heterogeneous audience. Thank you so much, Dr. Nelson, and thank you, the organizer.
Thank you so much. I want to thank all the members of panels that participating in this particular event. Thank you so much, Dr. Frederick Mordi, Mr. Raf Akpan, Mr. KAYODE-ADEDEJI, Mrs. Temitope Fagbemi, Dr. TOLULOPE, KAYODE-ADEDEJI. Thank you so much for participating. Thank you for contributing knowledge in this particular subject. Thank you. I also want to thank the members of the audience for making out time to participate in this event. Your comments, your insight, your perspective were very, very important. Thank you so much. I also want to thank the members of the team in the Center for Media and Communication Research, Mr. Tolu Olagunju, Mr. Callistus DK, and Mr. David. Thank you for your work, everything you've done in contributing to the success of this event. I also want to thank the SMC management, the School of Media and Communication at Pan Atlantic University Management, for the support for this particular project. Thank you so much. I want to use this opportunity to inform everybody here that the Center for Media and Communication Research is planning a symposium to be held in March 7 to 8, 2024, to coincide with the International Women's Day. So the event will come, we are going to publish the event very soon. And when we do that, we are also inviting you to participate in this event. Thank you once again, and bye-bye. Thank you so much, and bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. Thank you,
you,
everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
very much. We appreciate this program.
Thank
Looking
you.
forward to
Thank
having
you.
more of
Hope
this
to
session.
connect
Thank
with
you.
everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye. Bye-bye,
Goodbye.
See you
everyone.
next year.
See you next year. Bye-bye.